What is a punishment your parents used to do to you that at the time you thought was normal until you got older and realized it wasn't? When I was young, 7, 12, my dad would take apart my door knob and lock and put it on backwards so he could lock me in my own room. He would let me out, only to let me go to school and to use the bathroom once a day. I'd also only get food once a day, in which they would open my door, toss me some food, then lock it right back up. I got used to him doing that, so I kinda thought it was normal. Looking back, I realize it was incredibly abusive. My father never physically disciplined us, even though he would threaten to do so once in a while. If he got really mad, he would go back to the bedroom and close the door. Then my mother had to deal with our problems. She never understood why he never took any initiative in correcting our behavior. After he died, my father's sister told my mother that his father used to beat him all the time. Then it made sense. Breaking my stuff. But one time, my mother grabbed an N64 game of mine and used a pot to bust it up. The game survived, the pot died. She tossed the game in the dumpster. I snuck it out. I have no idea why, but my mother had a thing about us drinking water at times. I would be outside playing and come in saying I was thirsty, and my mother would put her finger on my tongue to feel it and say that I was fine. I guess because I still had saliva. She didn't always do it, just sometimes. This was in the 80s, and I've come to learn that she was always pilled out of her eyeballs on prescription drugs at the time and also suffered lifelong depression. It's just something that I think about sometimes. It seems quite cruel, but at the time I'd just go and drink out of the garden hose when she wasn't watching. My dad's thing was using his belt and making me take my pants down so he could whip my bare ass. I never thought much of it until my gym teacher pulled me aside one day and told me to skip class that day because I had cuts all down the back of my legs. It was the 70s, so nothing else happened. I guess for some reason he didn't want the other boys to see it. My dad would jizz on me and my siblings. A lot. Here's the actual story. My dad is Iranian, so there's a little language barrier, even to this day. He had found that if he wrapped his hand around our wrists and pinched just the tiniest amount of wrist skin, it would cause us enough non-harmful pain to where we would give in to whatever he wanted us to do. And I think that he thought on some microscopic level, the noise this pinching would make was jizz. So there were times that my siblings and I would be dashing through the house in terror, and my dad would be chasing us, brandishing his hand, yelling, "I'm gonna jizz on you." And that's 100% true. I would get in trouble for simply expressing an opinion if it was counter to what my parents thought. My dad's punishment of choice was the belt on the bare bottom. I'm female and this went on well into my teens. He'd make me take off my pants and bend over the bed. It was as humiliating as it was painful. He was also the king of gaslighting and would sometimes ignore me for weeks if I'd slighted him in some way. There were times he acted like I didn't exist and I'd have no idea what I'd done to upset him. It made me very insecure because I never knew what would upset him. Or sometimes something that I'd said that made him laugh one time would piss him off the next time I said it. So, I'd say or do things that had amused him before in a desperate attempt at gaining his approval, only to set him off and end up getting beat and or ignored. I thought all of this was fairly normal. I once told my dad I was calling the cops on him, and he so confidently told me to go ahead because they'd take his side and I'd be the one in trouble. I believed him. I thought this was how all families must be, and that it was all my fault anyway. I was horrible for making him do these things. It wasn't until I was a teen that I kind of realized not all parents acted like that. So then I just thought I had strict parents. It wasn't until I was an adult that I realized what I'd endure was actual abuse, yet I still felt weird calling it that. The fact didn't really hit home for me until I had my own kids. Then it was like someone finally turned on the light. That's when the therapy started. When my sister and I were younger, about 4 and 7, she would pee her pants, and I had trouble sleeping. My parents' solution to this was to make my sister wear her peed underwear like a hat on her head and only address her as gross pee head. They also decided the way to cure my sleeping problems was for my stepdad to drag me out of bed at 4:30/5 am. He'd make me march up and down the street with no shoes, chanting, "I will let my parents sleep at night. I will not wake people up." We'd do this for an hour, or until I started to cry. He called them army days. I didn't realize how insanely abusive these things were until I was telling stories to a boyfriend of mine a couple years ago, and he got upset about my abusive childhood. It honestly seemed normal to me. My ex-stepdad was weird. If I left a cup of soda out, he would pour the whole bottle down the sink. He would take away Christmas or birthday gifts if we were bad, whatever that meant. My things got taken away a lot. Feelings were frowned upon. He was super protective of my mom during a time when I needed her the most. I was 10 and my parents had just gotten divorced, and we moved a few hundred miles away. I remember maybe a month after we moved I had a massive ear infection. I was crying because it hurt so bad, and instead of comforting me, he was just holding my mom, telling her how great she was. Like me and my siblings, any bad feeling we had just ruined her life or something. What made it hard was a lot of the things I was getting punished for were because I had severe, undiagnosed at the time anxiety. Happy ending, she dropped his ass when I was 15 and I have an amazing relationship. My mom hated me being fat, so she would make me just eat iceberg lettuce while everyone ate real dinner. I would cry so much, but she'd say it's my fault for getting fat. She also would only buy me clothes way too small for me, probably hoping I would be inspired to fit in them, which sucked because every time I told her I didn't have clothes for school she would throw me down and beat me up savagely. She also made me go to stupid shit from exercise classes to acupuncture alone to find the cure for my chubbiness. I hated going, and it made me hate myself even more. Finally, a thread I can comment on. In 7th grade we were talking about how our fathers would smack us etc. when we were bad. There was this kid who once told us about how his father would poke his and his little sister's butthole if they were bad. Meaning if they did something naughty his father would stick his finger up inside the kid's asshole. At the time we thought it was so gross but not abuse, too young. Years later I'm in high school with him. He's a little withdrawn, but he always was GBH. Never brought it up, but I always remembered. Sorry, there is no justice to this story, like you may have wanted, at least to my knowledge. My dad would punch and break things all the time. Yeah, we got belt spanked, but his anger outbursts caused me the most long-term damage. For instance, he might get mad at breakfast for something random, and then he'd just punch our TV and break it. One time he scratched his truck, so he got out and started beating up the mailbox and going crazy on it while we just sat there and watched. Holes in the walls, temper tantrums, you name it, he did it. He would also get in fights at softball games and whatever else. As an adult, I have a really bad startle reaction to any sudden noise. I don't like violence of any kind. If I see people fighting, or even animals, it causes huge anxiety in my gut. I don't spank my kids, and never will, or resort to any sudden outburst. They are amazing children, and it's proof that kids can behave without spankings. Sometimes abuse is not obvious to anyone reading. If you have an anger problem, and take it out on things, get help. Even if you don't hurt your child directly, trust me, that violence is still sinking very deep into their psyches. Let's see, what else? My mom used to do this thing, where she told my siblings she loved them, but would purposely not say my name. This taught me from an early age that I was damaged and not worthy to be loved. It was also very normal for my dad to call us stupid, idiots, or completely stonewall us and respond to our questions with dead silence. This was the worst. Growing up though, I just always assumed every household was like this. I have trouble even writing a lot of things on here. BC, I always fear there's an abusive parent reading this thread to get ideas to use on their kids. I think the paranoia and sensitivity will be something I'll always carry. Severe verbal abuse. I only just recently realized this, but my father has severe anger problems, and whenever he was pissed off at me, he would throw things, yell, and point out every one of my flaws, and tell me how I'd never amount to anything because of them. I started believing him, and now he's the reason I have no self-esteem. Not my parent, but this guy my mom dated before marrying. He would put down uncooked rice on the floor next to a wall and make me kneel on the rice while having my hands on the wall as if holding up the wall. I still get chills just touching uncooked rice. I'm 25. This happened in the late 90s when I was around 5. This has to be some kind of old school form of punishment, no? When my dad was in grade school, teachers were allowed to give the strap to students for punishment. And when my dad got the strap at school, his old man would strap him again for getting in shit at school. So, when my dad was raising me, back in the day, it was not unusual at all for parents to spank their kids. I was lucky, he only ever used his hand on my ass. He didn't hold back, though. My ass was tanned plenty. He was a big dude, and an angry dude a fair amount of the time. Today we call that abuse. I honestly don't want to debate anyone on whether it was or wasn't, because I'm not really sure. I lived it, and I know the studies that have been done, and they aren't wrong. I just don't hate my dad for it. He was only doing what he was taught, and what many other parents did as well, back a few decades ago. And, if it had been called abuse, and had there been awareness about it back when I was a kid, I don't think my dad would have done it. Not my parents, but my aunt who used to babysit us always threatened to have us put in a mental institution. Anytime one of us kids acted up, she would go on a rant about calling the mental hospital and having us sent there and locked up. I mean, we weren't teenagers or anything, we were all 5 to 10 years old. It didn't take me too long to realize she was most likely the one who should have been carted off to a mental institution. I was completely in charge of my younger brothers. I had to change diapers, give them baths, feed them, get them dressed. Everything was my job. When I was in high school, I was responsible for watching them over summer break, and if I wanted to hang out with friends I had to take them with me. My mom bragged about it to her friends. Said it was the best form of birth control, so I wouldn't want to risk having sex as a teen and getting pregnant. Thing is, she essentially made me a teen mom. In trying to prevent me from becoming a teen mom, I had to make all the sacrifices a teen mom has to make without even getting pregnant. Destroying my things. Making me cook for myself from the age of 5 and up. I didn't realize this was unusual until my therapist, just last week, told me. Withholding food. Withholding water. Slamming my head into walls. Manipulating me into doing things I didn't want to do. Laughing at me if I got hurt and telling me to toughen up and stop with the crocodile tears. To this day the phrase crocodile tears gives me flashbacks. Stopping me from sleeping for days on end. Locking me in cupboards for days on end. Prohibiting me from showering. Ripping my hair out. Cutting my hair violently with blunt scissors. Isolating me to the point where I don't know basic things most people my age know. Beat and cut my twin sister if I messed up or became annoying. etc, etc, etc. I never thought twice about it. Anytime I tried to tell another adult, they would tell me to respect my elders or to stop misbehaving or assuming I was acting like a teenage brat, even at 7, and deserved everything I got, and more. Nobody reached out to comfort me. Nobody tried to protect me. Nobody did anything. Rarely in my life have I ever experienced human kindness, and yet I'm not a sociopath. I hate to see other people in pain, and I'll always extend a hand if it won't put me at a detriment. I will be okay, even if I'm a bit traumatized and mistrusting. I'm a functional and reasonably successful young adult with a future ahead of me, and I made it all on my own. My mom had a pretty short temper and was overall unreasonable. She verbally lashed out at us, mostly my dad, over the dumbest stuff. She talked crap about us behind our backs to each other. She'd, for example, ask me why I didn't do my laundry. I'd tell her that it slipped my mind, apologize, then tell her that I'd start it right away. She would then get pissed and demand that I had remembered to do it in the first place. You can't make things right for my mom. You just let her put you down until she's satisfied. The whole if you tell the truth I won't be upset thing parents tell us is complete garbage. When I was 15, my grandparents, her parents, were struggling medically. We were the only family they had in town, so we had to take care of them. Grandpa's going senile around this time and would often respond negatively to our help. He hated doctors and wouldn't take his medicine. He was more than we could handle. We recommended an institution that could take care of them. Grandpa opposed the idea every time we brought it up. Eventually my mom got sick of it and pretty much disconnected us from them. We didn't visit them on Mother's Day or Father's Day or any other holiday for that matter. When I wanted to visit them, I had to ask my dad for permission while keeping it a secret from mom. We moved about a year later, and my mom didn't let us share our new address with anyone but close friends because she didn't want her parents to know where we went. They're still in and out of the hospital, but I don't really know how they are. You can't call out her BS. She liked incriminating others, saying we were selfish for not letting me have feelings. Put yourself in my shoes, she'd say. Because of this, dad was always on her side, defending her. She targeted most of her rage at him anyways. Kids aren't playing outside? It's his fault for being at work, rather than taking them fishing or something. Break another laptop/phone. Must mean he's being stingy and buying his wife garbage because his stuff never breaks. Straight up just not happy. Find something he's doing wrong and create an argument about it. Growing up, I thought lashing out at others for stupidity and being inconvenient was just a normal thing people did. She was a terrible example that way, and it really hurt my sister. She's constantly struggling to control her explosive emotions and frequently is depressed. Mom and dad berated her for her emotional instability, and she felt like she couldn't do anything right. She's currently fighting to become a more independent and confident adult. Personally, I noticed the ways her bad example were affecting me early on, but it's still really hard to be a better person. Everybody rants, I noticed, but when I rant, people around me get super uncomfortable. I always catch myself too late. It was really difficult to decide how I felt about my mom, because she was also genuinely loving and really cared about us. She just put herself first. I loved her, yet I hated her for the way she treated my dad. He deserved better.